This is a lecture from Open Tuition. For the free lecture notes that go with this podcast, please visit opentuition.com.
Now we're going to look at a question, CiniCentre, which is fairly typical of a Part B question from Paper P3. It's typical because even in the shorter Part B questions, you're provided with a substantial amount of information giving details about the scenario. The question also provides you with numerical information. Whenever numerical information is provided, you'll be expected to use it. It often contains valuable insights into the strategic position of the company or organization. Here, the question is divided into two parts. Often Part B questions have 3 or 4 parts. It's strongly suggested that you read and study this question for 5 to 10 minutes. Then we'll go through it together and see how best to approach it. Let's look at the requirements. You have to look at these carefully to make sure you answer the question accurately. And also, the way the requirements are phrased will frequently give you valuable insights into what the examiner wants you to bring out in your answer. Here we're told that John used to work in a profit-seeking organization. CiniCentre is obviously a not-for-profit organization, relying substantially on public funding. And when you move to a non-for-profit organization, and when you move to a not-for-profit organization, things tend to get much more complex, as he's noticed. You don't have the great unifying force of profit anymore, and the stakeholders are likely to be much more disparate. And the stakeholders are likely to be much less unified in what they want out of the organization. It talks about internal and external stakeholders. We'll have to identify some of those, and then it asks us to analyze them. How can we analyze them? And about the only tool around dealing with stakeholders is Mendelev's matrix. We have to explain also how the analysis can assist John. The completely wrong way to answer this question is simply to talk about what stakeholders are in the abstract, to talk about Mendelev's matrix in the abstract. Nearly all the questions in P3 require you to apply knowledge by applying suitable models to the information in the scenario. Part B is actually very straightforward. Previously, we haven't had any sort of strategic management or strategic planning. We're asked to suggest why strategic planning might be useful to the organization. And earlier in the slides, you were given a comprehensive list of what strategic planning could do for an organization. Again, what we mustn't do is simply reproduce that list. We have to give specific examples of the advantages that strategic planning might bring to CiniCentre. Now we'll look at Part A in a little bit more detail. Identifying the various stakeholder groups is really very easy. Each of the functions of CiniCentre will have its employees, its champions, its supporters, its users. So we have the film theatre, the museum, the restaurant, the film archive unit, the film institute. We also have the various support units. And of course, because the government is one of the key providers of finance, the government will be a very interested stakeholder and probably a very powerful one. We can think about the various power these stakeholders have later. Why might the stakeholder analysis be useful to John? And his problem comes because of the financial deficit. At the moment, CiniCentre is showing a deficit of 0.45. At the moment, CiniCentre is showing a deficit of 0.45. But the government grant is set to reduce over the next few years. It will go down to 7.2, and this will increase the deficit to 2.25. This puts considerable strain on the management of CiniCentre. They'll have to make some hard choices. Some stakeholders will be really irritated and disappointed. And this is why some sort of stakeholder analysis using Mendelev's matrix will be very useful to John to sort out, to come to the best compromise solution. Part B asks us what the advantages of strategic management are. The list that you were given on the slide contained the following. And let's see if any of these can be applied to CiniCentre. First of all, it suggested that strategic planning can help to establish the long-term objectives of the organization, and CiniCentre certainly needs to do that. What is its purpose? For example, is its purpose to provide what might be called commercial cinemas, or is its purpose to provide what can't be provided commercially? For example, a museum, and particularly perhaps the film archive unit, which is charged with looking after old and valuable films. Secondly, the organization is much better coordinated. An example here might be how are the various income or deficits of the different sections of CiniCentre dependent on each other. For example, if John were to decide to close down the film theatre, what effect might that have on the profit of the Globe catering arm of the organization? Third, it can take time to implement plans. We need a series of objectives, often set out on an annual basis. There seems to be quite a lot of time pressure here, because we're already in deficit and this is increasing. And setting out a timetable over the next few years of the changes needed will be extremely valuable. The fourth point is that management can seek to control the future. CiniCentre is being put under particular pressure because the government grant is being cut. What do most people do when this happens? They complain. They try and make a fuss in the press. They will go and see ministers. They might go and see their parliamentary representative. Sometimes governments change their policies in the face of criticism. We could also say here that one way in which it could change the future to get rid of this deficit is perhaps to replace government funding, perhaps by some sort of commercial sponsorship deal. Finally, the organization is forced to look ahead. And again, it sees that things are bad and are going to get worse. Something has to be done. If it didn't look ahead, the financial crisis would surprise it, and it would be in a much weaker position to do anything about it.